The sun beat down hard on the cracked pavement of Marlin Ridge, a forgotten farming town tucked deep in central Oklahoma. Inside Tanisha's griddle house, the only diner still open for 20 miles, Tanisha Evans scrubbed the counter with aching hands. Her fingers were raw from cleaning and her bank account nearly empty, not enough to cover her father's insulin, let alone the electric bill blinking red in her purse. Just a few more weeks, she told herself, watching the ceiling fan wobble overhead like it might give out. This place was her father's dream. Now it was her last chance. The bell above the door jingled, and everything shifted. A man stepped in, tall and broad-shouldered, his black leather jacket dusty from the road, a patch on his back unmistakable, a Death's Rider's MC skull gripping a scythe. The few locals inside stiffened. Forks paused midair. Even the old radio cut to static. But Tanisha didn't flinch. Her father once said, "A dollar's a dollar, serve the soul, not the skin." So she poured the man a coffee. What she didn't know then was that this moment, this one act of quiet courage, was about to turn her entire town upside down. Part 1. He just wanted coffee. Tanisha Evans poured the steaming black coffee with practiced ease. Though her hands trembled just a little, the mug clinked against the Formica counter, a sound too sharp in the heavy silence. The biker gave her a soft nod of thanks and cradled the cup like it held something more than caffeine, maybe warmth, maybe dignity. From the booth nearest the door, Mrs. Ilna Pritchard, retired teacher and queen of the church bake sale, leaned toward her husband and whispered loud enough for half the diner to hear. "Lord have mercy, that's one of those Death's Riders, ain't it?" Tanisha didn't flinch. She'd heard worse, from folks who hid cruelty behind casseroles and polite smiles. She wiped her hands on her apron and turned to grab the breakfast order, pretending not to hear the murmurs that followed. The diner door chimed again, this time sharper, meaner. Sheriff Rick Dalton and Deputy Annie Burns stepped inside, boots tapping like warning shots on tile. Rick wore mirrored sunglasses, inside, and chewed a toothpick like he was auditioning for a bad western. His voice, when it came, was oily with performative charm. "Morning, Miss Evans," he drawled, though his eyes locked immediately on the biker at the end of the counter. "Everything all right here?" Tanisha set down the breakfast plate, eggs, toast, sausage links, and stepped between them, trying to smile. Just a hungry traveler stopping in. "Sheriff, no trouble, huh?" Rick grunted. "That so?" He sauntered toward the man, who hadn't moved, hadn't said a word since ordering his coffee. His plate sat untouched. He looked exhausted, not dangerous, just worn down. A hospital bracelet peeked from under his sleeve, and Tanisha caught it again. The way his fingers trembled just slightly. "ID." Rick barked suddenly, snapping his fingers like he was calling a dog. "Let's see it, now." The biker reached slowly, deliberately, for his wallet. But Rick's hand was already hovering near his holster. The tension in the room pulsed like a live wire. Mrs. Pritchard clutched her pearls. A teenage busboy ducked behind the soda fountain. Tanisha stepped forward, heat rising up her throat. "Sheriff, with respect, he hasn't done a damn thing wrong." Rick turned, sneering. "You vouching for him now? You run background checks with your hash browns?" Tanisha's jaw clenched. Her father had once warned her, in small towns, being right doesn't always mean being safe. But she remembered that man's eyes, red-rimmed, hollow, and utterly human. "I'm saying he's a customer. And at this diner, we serve food, not judgment." Annie Burns looked away, ashamed maybe, or just tired. But Rick leaned in, a bully too used to no one pushing back. "Well," he muttered, low and slow, "maybe you oughta think twice before siding with trash." That did it. Tanisha's voice rose, not loud but firm. "And maybe you oughta remember that badge doesn't make you God." A hush fell. Even the grill stopped sizzling. And just like that, Tanisha Evans drew her line in the Oklahoma dust. Part 2. Trouble comes in uniform. For a long moment, no one moved. Tanisha stood behind the counter, her hands planted firmly on the laminate, her breath tight in her chest. Sheriff Rick Dalton still loomed in front of her, his mirrored sunglasses now perched high on his forehead, revealing eyes that weren't angry so much as offended. Offended that she, a young black woman in an apron, had dared to speak back in his town. In his presence, the biker still hadn't touched his food. Deputy Annie Burns shifted uncomfortably behind the sheriff. Her hand hovered near her belt. Not on her weapon, but close, too close. Her jaw was clenched, and her eyes flicked between Tanisha and the biker like she was trying to will them both invisible. Rick leaned forward, palms flat against the counter, a forced smile spreading across his face like a stain. "You're real bold today, Tanisha. That kind of attitude might make people wonder what kind of business you're running here." Tanisha didn't flinch, but her heart pounded so loud she could barely hear herself breathe. She wanted to scream, she wanted to cry, but instead, she wiped her hands on her apron, slow, measured, like her daddy used to when trying not to lose his temper. "This is still America, isn't it?" she said. "A man can eat breakfast without being hunted across his plate." The room tensed again. A fork dropped. Someone muttered a quiet, "Lord have mercy." But no one else spoke. No one stood beside her. Rick straightened, the last bit of pretense draining from his face. "Let's go, Annie," he snapped. The deputy hesitated. For half a second, she looked directly at Tanisha. Her lips parted, like she wanted to say something, apologize. Maybe, but the words never came. She turned and followed Rick out the door. The bell above the diner gave a sharp, hollow jingle, and then the whispers started. From the corner booth, Mrs. Pritchard shook her head in disapproval. Her daddy would be ashamed, she murmured to her husband. Picking fights with lawmen over trash. Joe Duncan, who delivered propane tanks in the winter, scooted out without paying his bill. He didn't make eye contact, just dropped his napkin and left, shaking his head. Even the teen busboy avoided her gaze as he scraped plates in the back. Tanisha stood alone. The biker, still quiet, reached into his wallet. He pulled out a 20, laid it gently beneath the untouched plate, and looked up at her. "Thanks," he said, voice gravel thick, "for the coffee, and for seeing me." She nodded once. Her throat was too tight for words. "Name's Mark," he added softly. "Mark Reddick. My daughter's in the ICU. Willow General, stage 4. Been drivin' all night. Just needed a minute to catch my breath." Tanisha swallowed hard. "I hope she makes it," she whispered. He gave her the saddest smile she had ever seen, then walked out into the heat of the Oklahoma morning. The bell jingled again, and then, silence. No one else came in for the rest of the morning. By noon, Tanisha had wiped the counter 5 times. No customers, no phone orders. The town had made its decision, fast. She found a cardboard sign taped to the front door when she stepped out to dump the trash. "No biker lovers, no troublemakers." The words were thick, red, and slanted, like someone had scrawled them in anger. Her stomach twisted. She ripped it down, stuffed it in the dumpster. But it was too late. Marlin Ridge had drawn its line too. Back inside, she sat in the booth her father once claimed as his own. She laid her head on the table and let the weight of it all, the silence, the stares, the cowardice of people she'd known her whole life, settle heavy on her shoulders. But she didn't regret it. Not one word, not 1 second, because when everyone else saw a patch, she saw a man with shaking hands and a dying child. And she would do it again. Would still do it again. Even if it meant losing everything. If you're still with me in this story, still listening to Tanisha's journey, leave a comment below. Just type the number 1. That's all. Let me know you're walking this road with her. Part 3. The Price of a Stand. The next morning, the Oklahoma sun rose like fire, turning the flat fields around Marlin Ridge into waves of gold and dust. But inside Tanisha's griddle house, the light couldn't quite chase away the chill in the air. Tanisha unlocked the front door just before 6 a.m., same as she always did. She swept the floor, flipped the "open" sign, and set the coffee to brew. Everything smelled like routine, burnt toast, old wood, strong beans, but the stillness wasn't normal. It was deliberate. The breakfast crowd didn't come. No Mr. Everett with his newspaper and bacon well done. No Betty and Marlene, who used to giggle over French toast and gossip about bingo night. Even the 2 farmers who never spoke a word, only nodded and left big tips, were gone. By 9:30, the coffee had turned bitter in its pot. By 10 o'clock, Tanisha had cleaned the entire counter twice. She wiped every ketchup bottle, rearranged the condiments, restocked napkins, anything to keep her hands busy and her thoughts from spiraling. At 11 o'clock, she sat alone in the back booth and stared out the front window, where Main Street stretched quiet and empty. A breeze stirred the American flag outside the post office. Somewhere a truck backfired, but no one walked through her door. It wasn't just that people stopped coming. It was the way they looked at her now. Cold glances through shop windows. Quick turns away at the gas station. At the pharmacy that afternoon. The clerk avoided her eyes and rang her up in silence. Tanisha wanted to scream, to demand they say something, anything. Was she wrong? Was protecting a man with a hospital bracelet and a trembling hand somehow worse than letting him be humiliated? She thought about her father, Bobby Evans, once a truck driver with a laugh big enough to fill a stadium. Now, half his body was paralyzed from a stroke, tucked in a narrow hospital bed at Willow General, just a few floors above the ICU where Mark's daughter lay. That night, Tanisha drove through the quiet town to the hospital. She stopped at room 212. Like she did every week, and eased the door open. The soft hum of machines greeted her like always. A comfort and a curse. Her father's chest rose and fell in rhythm with the beeping monitor. His skin looked pale under the fluorescent light. He didn't open his eyes. Tanisha sat beside him and took his hand, still calloused from years on the road. "Hey, Daddy," she whispered. "I picked a fight with the sheriff." She smiled, but her voice cracked. A tear escaped before she could stop it. "I didn't mean to, but you always told me to treat people by how they act, not how they look. And this guy, this biker, he was scared. He was hurting, and I couldn't just ignore that. Not after everything we've been through." She paused, watching the green line pulse across the screen. The diner's empty. People are talking. Someone even taped a sign on the door yesterday. "Called me a troublemaker." She pressed her lips together, squeezing his hand gently. "I'm scared, Dad. I feel like I'm standing in a storm and everyone I thought would hold an umbrella just walked away." She closed her eyes. "But I think I did the right thing. And I think you'd be proud." She stayed there a long time, until the night nurse came in and gently touched her shoulder. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the branches of the trees. It smelled like rain. Back home, Tanisha took off her apron and folded it neatly on the kitchen counter. She didn't cry anymore. She was too tired. But even as she lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, she couldn't shake the weight in her chest. She was doing what was right. So why did it feel like she was losing everything? Tanisha's silence isn't weakness. It's courage with nowhere left to run. And tomorrow, she'd open that diner again. Even if no one walked through the door. Because hope doesn't need a crowd. It just needs a reason. Would you have stood with her? Part 4. The Sound of Redemption. The next morning began just like the one before. Tanisha unlocked the front door of the griddle house as the sky behind Marlin Ridge blushed pale pink. The smell of frying bacon didn't fill the air. The coffee stayed hot, untouched. The seats were empty. Her apron, stained and softened by years of wear, hung crooked from her waist as she wiped down the counter just to have something to do. Then the bell above the door jingled. She looked up, instinctively hopeful, but it wasn't one of the regulars. Two strangers stepped inside, a man and a woman, maybe in their 50s, worn from the road but holding themselves with quiet dignity. The man had a silver beard and a denim jacket patched with a subtle skull insignia. The woman's braid was long and gray, her vest decorated with a handful of faded pins. "Tanisha Evans?" the man asked. She nodded, cautious. "That's me." He offered his hand. "I'm Roy Reddick. This is my wife, Linda, Mark's brother." Tanisha's guard fell slightly. Is she okay? His daughter? Linda's smile faltered, still fighting. The doctors started something new. "It's a last shot." Tanisha's heart squeezed. "I'm sorry." Roy gave a nod. "Mark told us what you did. Said you didn't look at the patch. Said you looked at the man." Tanisha glanced at the counter. Embarrassed. Didn't seem like he needed judgment. Seemed like he needed a hot meal. Linda stepped closer. "Sometimes, those are the same thing." Tanisha poured them coffee. They sat, talked, laughed, even. But when they stood to leave, Roy placed a hand gently on the counter. "We wanted to thank you. Not with money." he said, with support. Tanisha blinked. Support? Roy gave a slow smile. Give it 5 minutes. At first, she thought it was thunder. A low rumble, distant. Then it grew louder, closer. Tanisha stepped to the window, heart stuttering. Down both ends of Main Street, the horizon shimmered with chrome. Motorcycles. Dozens. Then hundreds. They came in waves, riders of every age, color, gender, from all over Oklahoma and beyond. Their jackets bore the marks of different Death's Riders chapters. Some patched recently, others worn smooth. Some rode solo, others carried flags or flowers. But all came for the same reason. Because she had shown kindness when no one else would. Engines growled and echoed through the town. Then fell silent as kickstands dropped and boots hit pavement. Tanisha stood frozen as the parking lot vanished beneath leather vests and heavy boots. And then, the door opened again. One by one, bikers entered, respectful and quiet, nodding to her as if she were someone important. She stammered, I don't have enough food for all these people. Linda grinned. Taken care of. We called your suppliers last night. Trucks are on the way. All covered. Tanisha's knees nearly gave out. By who? By us, Roy said simply. Consider it an investment in kindness. The kitchen roared to life. Neighbors watched from across the street, stunned, curious. Some crossed over, hesitantly. Melvin, a high school friend Tanisha hadn't seen in years, stepped in with wide eyes. You still serve them sweet biscuits? Tanisha blinked, then smiled. Sure do. You'll have to share a table. Though. No problem, he said, sitting beside a woman with a bright pink mohawk and a patch that read, Reapers never quit. Soon, the griddle house was packed. Locals and bikers shared booths. Conversations sparked, slow at first. Then warm. Mrs. Applegate, who once clutched her purse tighter at the sight of a biker, now sipped tea while talking about quilting patterns with a woman whose arms were covered in tattoos. Tanisha moved through it all like a storm, flipping pancakes, sliding plates, refilling coffee. Her heart raced, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was something like joy. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, her father's diner wasn't dying. It was alive, thriving, changing. At the counter, Deputy Annie Burns appeared in plain clothes. No badge, no tension, just a coffee mug, and a quiet nod. Tanisha handed her a fresh pour without a word. Annie accepted it with the closest thing to a smile Tanisha had seen from her. The past wasn't gone, but the future had just walked through the door in worn boots and leather vests. And it brought hope with it. If Tanisha's diner gave you goosebumps today, if you felt that shift when kindness sparked something powerful, drop a comment below. Just type the number 2. That's all. Let me know you're still listening. Part 5. A seat at the table. The sun began its slow descent behind the wheat fields of Marlin Ridge, painting the sky in long streaks of gold and dusty rose. From the front steps of Tanisha's griddle house, the view was surreal. Motorcycles stretched down both sides of Main Street like a chrome river. Kids rode bikes between them, weaving through the gaps like minnows around whales. Old men leaned against light posts, trading stories with leather-clad bikers who, just days ago, would have been whispered about from behind curtains. Inside the diner, the tables were still full. Plates clinked. Laughter echoed off the tile. The kitchen ran hotter than it had in years. And Tanisha, still in her worn apron, sneakers aching, hair pulled back in a messy bun, couldn't stop smiling. She had no time to process it. But in small moments, when pouring coffee or wiping a counter, she caught glimpses. Glimpses of what her father always dreamed this place could be. Then the door opened again, and the chatter dropped to a low murmur. A man stepped inside, tall, broad-shouldered, his beard thick and white. His black leather vest bore bold white letters. President, Death's Riders, Riverside Chapter. He removed his sunglasses and smiled, voice rough but warm. You must be Tanisha. She nodded, stepping forward instinctively. And you must be Marcus Turner. They shook hands, firm and proud. You've made quite an impression, he said. Marcus turned to the room and raised one hand. Just like that, silence fell. Every biker, every diner, every eye turned to him. He cleared his throat. I won't take much time, he said, Just wanted to say a few words about this woman right here." He pointed gently at Tanisha, and she felt her chest tighten. When everyone else looked at one of ours and saw a problem, she saw a man. A father. And when folks came around trying to shame her for it, she didn't bend. She stood, alone. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. "Now in our world," Marcus continued, "loyalty and respect mean everything. And when someone earns that, they ride with us." He turned to Tanisha. "So, from this day forward, Tanisha's griddle house rides under the protection of the Death's Riders. Any chapter, any state, your family now." The room erupted. Applause thundered against the windows. Bikers stood and pounded their fists on tables. Locals clapped just as loud. Tanisha stood frozen, tears welling in her eyes. Overwhelmed. Then Marcus gestured again, and Roy stepped forward with a brown paper bundle. "From all of us," Roy said. Tanisha opened it slowly, hands shaking. Inside was a custom vest, black leather. Soft and perfectly fitted. Across the back, stitched in bold white thread, "Friend of the Riders." And beneath that, in smaller lettering, "Protected." Tucked in the pocket was a handwritten note. "Thank you for seeing the man, not the patch. Jessie smiled again today. She can't wait to meet you. Mark Reddick." Tanisha pressed the note to her chest. Behind her on the diner wall, she cleared a spot beside the old photograph of her father and the grease-stained apron he once wore with pride. There, she hung the vest, not as decoration, but as testimony, a symbol of what kindness can become when backed by conviction. Just as she stepped back, the bell above the door rang one more time. Sheriff Rick Dalton walked in. Not in uniform, no badge, just boots and a weathered ball cap in hand. He looked out of place, like a relic in a museum that no one quite remembered asking for. He stepped up to the counter, cleared his throat. "Coffee?" Tanisha asked, voice neutral. He nodded. She poured him a cup without ceremony and slid it across. He caught it carefully, as if afraid to spill. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Rick muttered, eyes down, "Good turnout today." Tanisha said nothing, just leaned against the counter, watching the reflection of the sunset in the coffee pot. Sometimes silence says more than words. Rick nodded stiffly and took a slow sip. The message was clear. The town had changed. And maybe, just maybe, he had to as well. That night, long after the last plate was washed and the last engine had rumbled off, Tanisha stepped outside and breathed in the still warm Oklahoma air. The scent of fresh pie and worn leather lingered like memory. Behind her, the diner glowed, not with fluorescent light, but with something deeper, with hope, with dignity, with proof that kindness still matters. And she had been the spark. When kindness costs everything, and still wins. Sometimes, the hardest choices are the ones no one sees. The quiet stands, the uncomfortable truths, the moments when doing what's right doesn't win you applause, it costs you everything. That was Tanisha's story. She didn't set out to be a hero. She was just a daughter running a struggling diner, trying to keep the lights on and her father's legacy alive. But when a stranger, a biker, a man the town had already judged, walked through her door, she did something radical. She treated him like a human being. And for that, the town turned its back. But here's the lesson that lingers long after the story ends. Kindness doesn't always come with comfort. Doing right won't always be rewarded immediately. Sometimes, it means standing alone, until the world catches up. Tanisha stood when no one else would. And in doing so, she reminded us all of something sacred. It's not the patch on your back, the clothes you wear, or the title on your shirt that defines your worth. It's how you treat people when no one's watching. It's what you do when doing nothing would be easier. And the most beautiful part? Her stand did change the world, not all at once. But one person, one plate, one act of courage at a time. So maybe that's the real invitation in this story. Not just to listen, but to act, to speak, to show up. The next time life places you in front of injustice, prejudice, or someone in need, remember Tanisha. And choose kindness, even if it costs you. Especially then. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you love, something you faced, or the kind of world you want to build, let us know. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, hit like if you believe in kindness without conditions. And don't forget to subscribe, so you never miss the next story that could change everything. We're building more than a channel here, we're building a community. One listener at a time.